Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Nancy Rynes, who's here to share with us her new book, Walking in the Light, a daily guidebook for enhancing peace, love, and connection. So let's welcome to the show, Nancy Rynes.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you for having me on. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I've been looking forward to this talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this?
So it's been about 8 years now, but about 8 years ago, I was in a little bit longer than 8 years ago. I was in a really kind of a tough place in my life, and just a lot of things were changing, and I wasn't really sure what my path in life was. And I was struggling with being an atheist, being a scientist. I had a lot of kind of deep existential things going on. And in January of 2014, so again, a little over 8 years ago, I had a very traumatic bicycle versus SUV accident. And of course, I was the one on the bicycle. And I got hit broadside by a woman who was driving this SUV who was very distracted by her cell phone. And I was as you can imagine, very, very seriously injured. I had a lot of broken bones, a lot of trauma to my neck and my lower spine. And the doctors really weren't sure if I was going to make it through the weekend. It was that traumatic. And they had scheduled me for surgery on Monday. Now, this event happened on a Friday, and they had scheduled me for surgery on Monday. And that surgery was really to go in and kind of repair my backbone, especially my lower back, just to make sure that I would, be able to walk again. And I went into surgery a little bit nervous, actually a lot nervous. That's an understatement. I was very nervous. I've been to surgeries before, never had an issue, but this one really scared me because it was kind of major. And I went in and they gave me the general anesthetic, and I did not react well to the anesthetic and ended up flatlining right away. My heart rate went to zero. My breathing went to zero. My blood pressure dropped to basically zero. And for all intents and purposes, I was dead on the operating table for about 2 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less, but just right around 2 minutes. And what I noticed wasn't any of that. I had no idea all that was going on. What I saw is that I woke up outdoors in a place that was not on this planet. It looked a little bit like Earth, but it was very ethereal, very different. It was just energetic in a different way. I could see energy flowing everywhere, and there was energy in the trees and the grasses and the mountains and the sky. And I began to wonder, wait a minute, I wonder what went on down there, because this isn't what I'm used to when one goes in for surgery. And it took me a little while to settle in. I don't know, there's no equivalent of time, but I settled into that. And then I began to think, well, shoot, I wonder if I died down there on the operating table. Because I remember I went into surgery, but why was I in this place? And that's when I started to think about if I had died, I began to wonder where it was that I was, and why I wasn't somewhere else. As my parents told me I would go to hell since I was an atheist, but it just didn't really feel like hell to me. So I was there for a little bit longer, and I was welcomed by, I guess it was the voice of God or spirit, if you want to call it that. It was an incredible voice that welcomed me to my home. This was my home. This is where I belonged. This was where we all belonged. It was a home for all of us, all of our souls, and which was a shocker to me because I didn't believe in any of that. And in a little bit of time, I had a womanly figure, female figure, come up to me and say that she was there to teach me certain things that I would need to know in order to go back to my life on Earth and to make it one that I would be happy and proud to live. And that started what felt like 2 or 3 months of teaching and learning and exploring, not really the spiritual world, but what it meant to be a loving, grateful human, what it meant to really be a loving person, to what love really was, what was gratitude, how does that all work together? How does free choice work? How do we best fit with each other on this planet? Like, what's the best way to get along with your neighbors, that kind of thing. So it was like 2 or 3 months of that. And like the most transformative part of all of that was when I was able to review my life here. And a lot of people talk about having a life review. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I had no idea what was going on. And it was a time where I was shown, different parts of my life as if I was back in that part of my life. So it wasn't like looking at a video necessarily. It was seeing these images, but also reliving them at the same time. And then reliving that event, not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of the person I was interacting with. So I could kind of see how I interacted with that person and how he or she perceived me. And that was like a super tough, but also really good learning experience to be able to be in that moment again, but from both perspectives, and see what it felt like when I either intentionally or unintentionally said something that hurt someone, or whether when I intentionally helped someone out, when I was, loving and grateful and all those good things. So I got to see my life from the perspective of me, but also from the perspective of the people around me, which was like super earth-shattering and the most incredibly transformative part of the experience for me. And of course, soon after that, I learned a whole bunch more stuff, and then was sent back here, to my life on Earth, really at first to make my life one that I would be proud to live. That was really my first goal. And I knew that coming back that I was here to improve my life and to make myself better. And then to share some of this stuff that I've learned with other people, whoever wanted to listen, kind of thing. And really just to let people know that they're loved beyond their ability to measure it, that God is love, truly love, all encompassing and all inclusive. And how, some of the ways that we can connect with that love, but also connect that love with each other. So, share that love with other people in a way that's helpful rather than harmful. So that's a gist of kind of what happened. Again, that was in 2014. I had another near-death experience in 2017, which I haven't talked about very much. But that's not in my original book. So that one was very short, but also a very interesting learning experience too for me. That was my choice to stay in that one. I wasn't sent back. I chose to stay here during that one. And that was super important for me to kind of go through that time where I was able to choose to stay and help other people rather than to feel like I was compelled to come back, So that one was super, super good. But it was really, really short. I haven't really written a book about it, but it's kind of included in the one we're going to be talking about today. So that in a nutshell is what happened. But those two events, those first two near-death experiences, really propelled me on a path in my life to really, first of all, take a good hard look at what I was doing and what I was thinking and how I was approaching my life, but then to improve it. And I spent the next several years really diving into that, really putting those messages that I learned into practice, into my life, and digging in and figuring out what that meant in, for today's society. Because, we can't really, most of us can't go off into the mountains and sit in meditation for 2 years. So I had to learn ways that I could take all of that information and make that fit into kind of a modern life. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since. I've been teaching people how to do that, besides really practicing that on myself. And so that's what led me to write the book, Walking in the Light, which we're going to be talking about in a minute.
Well, thank you for going over that, Nancy. I got to tell you, yeah, I was, I always knew about the first one. The second NDE was a surprise. And I think for a lot of people who maybe are maybe just aren't really religious at all, have no religious background, don't think about it one way or the other. I know when we've had our discussions before, you talk about the other side and how it was they really encouraged you to come back as opposed to staying there.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't exactly that first NDE in 2014. It really wasn't my time to go yet. And that was, even though I wanted to stay there, I've told you this before.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to stay there like nothing else. Like, you almost couldn't get me to come back here. I wanted to stay so badly. But I knew also, and I was told by my spiritual teacher there that it was my time to come back. I wasn't done yet. I hadn't done what I needed to do yet, what I had agreed to do, or what I wanted to accomplish in this life. And so that was really my chance to come back and kind of make, achieve those things that I wanted to achieve in my life. And really just become the person I wanted to become.
You often hear of people who've had near-death experiences kind of fight having to come back, like a little kid pitching a fit in a grocery store, So.
Right. That's what I felt like at one point. And I really was kind of pitching a fit. And I knew that was silly to do that, but I really wanted to stay, and I couldn't. I wasn't really having any luck convincing those who were in control of it not to send me back. I just really wanted to stay and be with, those people I loved who had gone on before me. But I'm, now I'm okay with that. I understand in hindsight now. I understand why I was sent back. And like I said, that second NDE gave me the choice that I could have gone at that point. But I chose to stay here. And so that one really altered my attitude. Being given the choice, really and truly given the choice to do something, makes a huge difference. But I understood, I had a lot left on my plate that would have gone unfinished. And things that I really my soul really wanted to accomplish. So it's tough. I know a lot of near-death experiencers have a really hard time when they come back, just because they felt like, they didn't have that choice. And it takes a while to work through that. It took me about 18 months actually to work through that. But I did get through it. And now I'm glad, now I'm glad I'm back. So y'all are stuck with me for a while.
Well, I'm glad that we are. Well, I know your first best-selling book, Awakenings from the Light, 12 life lessons from a near-death experience, goes over your first near-death experience, which that whole thing was it was rough. That whole thing was really rough. And you had a lot of channeling in that book, right?
A lot of it, it wasn't necessarily channeling. Like about half of the book was the stuff that, I was taught while I was over there, while I was dead. Those were the things that I was taught when I was dead. And I tried to remember it from almost as soon as I was sent back. So as soon as I woke up in the hospital recovery room and knew something had happened, I wanted to write it down. It took me a few days just physically, to be able to write all that stuff down. And I did. I had a friend of mine brought in a notebook and a bunch of pens and stuff and drawing pencils for me. So I just wrote as much as I could. Sometimes it was only a minute or two before I fell asleep. I mean, I was just so physically traumatized by the accident that sometimes I just couldn't stay awake for very long. So as much as I could, I just wrote it exactly what it was down. Sometimes I had to kind of go into a meditative state when I got a little bit healthier and kind of try to remember it or else get the information again. So, my teacher, when I was over there, said, don't worry, you might not remember all of this exactly as we taught you, but it's going to come back once you kind of get up and moving around again. So I wasn't really too concerned about forgetting it, but I wanted to write it down while it was still fresh. And I actually still have that journal. I keep it here in my office so that I can go back and look at it every once in a while. But I did write it down as much as I could right away, just so I wouldn't lose that freshness, those initial visuals that I kept in my brain. And I just didn't want to lose that. But some of it was, I guess there was a little bit that some people might call channeling that I got during my meditations, over the next couple of months. But I guess it wouldn't be traditional channeling. It was really more like information that came to me during meditation. But I guess if that's what you want to call it, then so be it. I'm not going to try to put words around it, but a lot of the information was really the stuff that was given to me while I was over there. And not necessarily word for word, but as close as I could remember. I had to change it so that people could read it. It wasn't, their language is a little bit kludgy to put into English. So I had to put it into an English that flowed really well. But other than that, that part. And the way that I divide that up is each chapter has that kind of initial teaching right at the beginning of the chapter. And then after that, I talk about, my take on it and how you can incorporate that into your life. So it's super practical that way. I've got it, each chapter is divided up into my, I'm a logical, rational kind of analytical thinker. So that's me, putting it into something that I could make sense of.
Well, of course, since your work has been a research scientist, so I could see how you have everything lined out,
Right.
So, well, and so walking in the light. Now, what was the inspiration behind this book?
So I had never intended to do this book, by the way. So this was not the one that I had in my brain when I was thinking about what was the next book to write. But during COVID, I got this inspiration to do this book, mostly as a result of listening to my readers. And my readers and the people that listen, to when I do interviews like this one, they were super interested they wanted more information on how it was that I was able to achieve like this state of inner peace that I have now. Over that, during that 7 or so years after my near-death experience, they wanted to know the details. Like, how did you do that? How did you achieve this state of calmness or peace? Because that, when people saw me speak in person, that was one of the things that everybody commented on was, you're so peaceful and calming. It feels good to be around you. How can I do that for myself? And I started to think about that during, the COVID lockdowns. And I thought, well, I'll just put it together in like a little, it's not really a workbook, but kind of a daily inspirational journal and guidebook. And I'll just share with people the kinds of things that I did and how I achieved this for myself. And that's really what I wanted to do. It's really a working guidebook. People can write in it if they want to, or they can keep a separate journal. Either way works. But that process that I went through was at first it was really lax and I wouldn't be very consistent with it. And it turns out consistency, as it's not like rocket science here, but consistency is more important than complicated practices. So what I found worked for me was simple practices done consistently over time. That really helped me learn how to get into a very peaceful place in my life. So that was one part of it. The other part of it was physical self-care, which a lot of spiritual people don't talk about. A lot of spiritual teachers do not talk about this, but it's super important to get your eating cleaned up. Basically get rid of junk foods, get rid of all that junk out of your diet. It really does help. Honestly, it really does help to get rid of, sugars and as much as possible and really eat a healthy diet for you. I don't tell people what that is for them, but you know what it is for you. It's for most people, a lot of vegetables, a lot of good, healthy, whole foods kind of thing, not the grocery store chain, but just, healthy foods. So that's the super important part of it. And then the other part is, just doing a few spiritual practices, and they don't have to be super hard. But I always started off my day with an inspirational reading of about 15 minutes or so. And that's how each day, I've got this book divided into days, so you can work on it on a daily basis for about 3 months. And each day is devoted to a different topic. And there's a little reading that may take 10 or 15 minutes. And then there, some thought exercises for you to do. But just little things that you can do throughout the day to make you more conscious and more aware in each and every moment. It's really more, it's about becoming present and aware in as much of your life as you can. And that takes practice for a lot of people. It isn't just an overnight thing for most of us. So that's what this book is really, it's one way to do it. It's my way to do it. So it can work for people. And I've had a lot of really good reviews from people that have worked through it. In fact, I know one of my friends has worked through it, I think at least 3 times now. She's bought 3 different copies and written each one. And she just loves the way that is laid out. It's just so different. And then at the end of each day, it's optional, but I suggest that people do like a daily life review where you go back and think about your day. What are you grateful for? What went well today and what didn't go so well today, and what you can do better tomorrow. So those types of things really help when you start looking at your day and examining it and just going, oh yeah, that really worked well. Oh, that didn't work so well. How can I change things for tomorrow? It brings a level of consciousness into your day and really helps kind of bring you into more focus for going forward in a healthy and, productive and loving way too.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because my goodness, it seems that often when people get into like a personal practice, you hear people talk about how they review their days for work. They go back and review, oh, how did that meeting go? How did things go? But you don't hear about that from either a personal, like my personal journey or my spiritual journey.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I've been in, I'm just now I'm not doing IT work anymore, information technology. I was just for a little while doing some consulting work in the healthcare IT realm. But you're right. That's exactly something that we do, in a lot of corporate environments is when we're done with a project, no matter what it is, we do, like in the government, they would call it an after action review. In, regular consulting, we just call it a project review. But we'd always go back and we'd look at the project and do exactly that. And I thought, well, why don't we just do that ourselves? That was honestly very helpful for me in business and even more helpful in my personal life to just think about life that way. Like, okay, the more I did it, the less I was emotionally involved, and I didn't get depressed or anything like that. It's really just a time for you to look back on your day and really think about it from kind of a rational, a little bit, a little bit distant perspective, and think, wow, I could have done better with that today. Or, you know what, I did a really great job on that thing. And then note that and keep track of those really cool things that you did. So on those days where it's not so great, you can go back and look at all of those good things that went on in your life and still feel grateful. That's really a part of it too, is continuing being in that place of gratitude and love for your life here. Even if it's just a little tiny bit of gratitude, that can help so many people really change the way that they think about their lives.
Yeah, like how often do we really look at the things that we have and just be grateful for that, like a roof over our head, meal on our plate, a tank full of gas, a job, all those
Right.
different things that, other people may be struggling to have or don't have or, are wishing for.
Right. I think about here, I live here in Arizona now. I'm every day now, and when it's warm in the summertime, when it's 95 degrees, super grateful that I have air conditioning and that I have a comfortable house and water when I turn on the tap. I mean, those three things alone are just amazing things. It'd be little stuff, like when I first was recovering from my accident, I was just grateful to be able to feel my feet. Like I was so happy that I wasn't paralyzed, because I easily could have been paralyzed from that accident. And so for a long, long time, I was grateful just to be able to stand up on my own and walk. So it can be simple, relatively simple things like that that are super powerful, especially if you just allow yourself to really get into that. Think about, oh my gosh, yeah, there are people who can't walk. There are people who they can't see, they can't hear, they don't have running water, they don't have a continuous food supply. So even those basic things can be amazingly transformative in your life, just being grateful for those things.
So much to be grateful for there. And for our listeners that are not really aware of your full story, and you go into great detail in Awakenings from the Light. I mean, when the woman ran you and your bike over, you were dragged for, I can't remember the exact amount of feet, but people had to jump in front of her car. She was so engrossed in texting. People
Right.
had to jump in front of her car to get her to stop. And it was a very, very serious thing. It's not like, oh, she hit me with on the bike and just, kept going. It was pretty serious.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And even during that, just during the crash itself, I mean, I honestly, going into it, I really didn't know. I didn't think I was going to survive it. I mean, just those, however long that took, I don't know, 30 seconds or whatever. It felt like forever. But, even during that relatively short amount of time that the accident was occurring, I really, from one moment to the next, didn't know if I was going to be alive. And that was really a wake-up call, to be in that situation, to think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see my daughter grow up. I'm not going to see my sisters ever again, and all of that stuff was going through my mind as this accident was unfolding. And it's hard because I really didn't feel like I had much control, over that accident. And to be in the middle of that, just that, even if the following, near death experience a few days later didn't happen, just that part of it probably would have helped me transform my life. Because when you're really truly looking down that alleyway, walking down the pathway to the afterlife, especially during a traumatic accident like that, that even just that really alters your perceptions of being here. It really makes you grateful for when you do wake up in the ER a couple of hours later.
I have no doubt about that. I have no doubt about that. And so when we talk about near-death experiences, otherwise known as NDEs, I've heard people say that they wish they had an NDE because they believe that people who have had near-death experiences are more gifted, more clairvoyant, have special talents. What are some of the myths around that?
Yeah, some of the myths are that you're somehow more special or better or something than anybody else, and that is so totally not the case. It's hard to know. You can't really pick it out of a lineup who might have a near-death experience. I think a lot more people have them than are reported. So let's just get that off on the table right now. I think just from, my experiences in the last 7 or 8 years going around and talking and just being a normal human being, I have heard people as I'm in the mall, the shopping mall, or at the grocery store, or even when I was working in a community garden up near Tacoma, Washington. I just happened to be working in the garden, and there were 2 women who were also, working in the garden, just chatting about both of their husbands just had near-death experiences when they each had heart attacks separately, within the last year. And they're like, oh yeah, my husband had one of those near-death experiences. He was floating up near the ceiling while they were trying to resuscitate him. So they were comparing notes, So I think this stuff happens a lot more than is ever reported. Some people just don't want to share it. Some people feel ashamed or they feel like they shouldn't share it. So I think they're underreported, but you are not more special for having had one. They happen to a lot of people. And I think it might actually, in my case, one of my readers actually said, and I love the way she put this, she said, I think you just needed it more than other people did.
Well, I guess we all need it more than other people, right?
Yeah. I mean, just the place that I was in my life, nothing was getting through to me. Like nothing was getting through to me. And so this is what it was going to take for me to get my wake up call. So maybe it's that. Maybe those of us who report these things needed them more than other people. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any kind of like specialness if we look across the range of people that have them. Because again, we've got reporting bias here, and I'm going to put my scientist hat on for a second. We've got a lot of reporting bias. There are people who won't report them because of their religious background, their ethnic background, their nationality, whatever. There's a lot of reasons why people won't report them. So, we have to be super careful about reporting bias when we look at those things. But I don't really see, if I look around at the people that I know who have had these, I don't see any specialness other than most of us really needed the wake up call. And I hate to put it that way, but that seems to be like the best explanation I can come up with.
Well, and I appreciate that because I think a lot of times people will think, well, I've heard this before where it's like, well, I'm not as special, or I don't have, I'm not so highly advanced because I haven't had a near-death experience. And that is definitely not something to wish for.
No, it's not. It's, and I disavow people of that notion as much as I can, because if I could have made this personal transformation in any other way than to die, I would prefer that. And that's why I wrote Walking in the Light, because I died so you don't have to. Because the death part, honestly, is not the hard part. That's actually relatively like seamless. Like people don't have to really think too hard as they're going through that transition. It may be emotionally wrenching, and for a lot of people it is, to make that transition, to know that you're not going to see your kids again for a while, or, your spouse or whatever. You'll see them again at some point, but just having that separation there really bothers a lot of people. But the hard part, the really hard part, is coming back. The life review is relatively easy. It's a lot easier than coming back here and having to, you've seen the other side. You've been there. You've been in what we call the afterlife. Maybe you've been with your loved ones, and you've gotten a lot of, maybe you got some learnings. Maybe you were taught a lot of stuff, but then you have to come back here. And not only are you dealing with physical trauma, a lot of people have, whether they've had, a heart problem or a stroke or whatever, like me, a traumatic accident, you're going to have medical issues, because the real definition of a near-death experience is you die. You're physically, medically dead. That's it. It's not, oh, that was a close brush with death. No, it is true physical death. So there's a difference. We use that term very loosely, but the real definition of a near-death experience is truly, dying and being dead for a certain amount of time, having your physical body dead for a certain amount of time. But coming back and just, dealing with the physical issues alone is challenging enough. But then you're dealing with people around you who can't believe what you just told them. A lot of people lose friends, and some people go through divorces after this, because now they've basically seen the light, and they know that this universe is love. They know that this universe is built on love. It's divine love. It's God's love. And it's challenging to come back into this physical space where they're apparently, they're not truly, but they're apparently separated from that love. And it's hard for them to connect with it again. And so that it's gut wrenching. That part is really hard. And it's really hard to come back here and look around and see how people treat each other, and to know, yeah, I used to do some of that. So then you have to make amends, or at least most people want to make amends. You're not compelled to, but a lot of people feel the need to make amends when they come back, and they want to make things better. So it's a lot of work. So if you can make personal advancements or spiritual advancements without dying, this is the way I would recommend you go.
Well, I appreciate you going through that. I know we've had discussions on this topic before,
Yeah.
and just how that all comes together. And, I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us and what you have learned when you're on the other side. Now, with your new book, I mean, I know this isn't the way with any of the books you have so far, but with your new book, does it matter? Do we have to have any kind of spiritual or religious affiliation or personal philosophy, or are we supposed to be hitting some kind of life challenges in order to start working with this book?
No. In fact, one of my goals in coming back here to this life was to be a bridge amongst different religions, amongst different philosophies, and also from science to spirituality. So the book is written for anybody. You don't have to have a specific religious or philosophical view on life. If you have a spiritual bent, already, that's cool, because, you'll be able to kind of wrap your brain around some of the stuff a little bit easier. But there aren't really any complicated practices. I have some practices in the back of the book. So if you don't know how to meditate, you can learn a little basic meditation technique here in this book. So you don't have to have any specific training in order to start it. Pretty much everything you need to go through the book is in the book. It's all there for you. Most of it is just, thinking about your life and, what you want to accomplish in your life, and making you think about what you intend to do every day, and then evaluate whether you actually achieved that. So there's a little bit of motivational stuff in there for, those people who are into it. So no, it's written to be very intentionally to go across, religious backgrounds or faiths, different philosophies. So no, you can be anybody. and just dive into it. In fact, you don't even have to start on day one. You can start in the middle if you want, and work your way to the end, or work different weeks at different times. You don't have to go in order. It was very intentional the way that I laid all of that out, so that it would just be easy for someone to just open it up to one page and just do that one page on that particular day. So I tried to make it as easy and accessible as possible.
In your book, you start the chapter off with love, and you talk about divine love. What does that mean?
Well, that's a really good question, because that's one of the things I'm working on right now with my next book. So you're anticipating the work in progress already. So what I mean by that and it's not just the love that we feel for each other, like, your kids or your spouse or friends or whatever. What I'm talking about here is essentially the nature of the universe kind of thing. It's, I used to call it, that divine love on that God scale, the big God, the love on that scale really forms the structure of this entire universe. It's the energy that pervades everything. It's that divine love, that divine essence that pervades everything. We're all a part of it right here, right now. You can't separate yourself from it. You can try. I tried for a long time. You can try, but you can't ever hide from it. It's a part of who we are. We are a part of it, actually. And, some scientists, I've got some quotes in this new book that I'm working on from some physicists who now understand that when people like me say divine love, there are some people that call it the divine matrix. And there's a lot of other terms for it. But it's from the scientific standpoint, they're beginning to see that it's really what they're talking about too. They call it 0 point, the energy of 0 point, or the energy of the universe. It's that I can't remember what Hal Puthoff actually calls it. He's a physicist down in Austin. But he realized, in fact, he was the one that kind of pointed this out to a lot of us, is what you in the spiritual community call, the Akashic field or divine field or the divine love. That is what we call on the physics side of the house, really 0 point energy, or the energy of the universe. It's the energy of this entire place that we live in. So what's around us all is masquerading as physical. When we're here on this planet, it really isn't physical. It's really energy. And we've seen that physicists have been talking about this for about the last 100 years now or so. This world is not truly physical. It is energetic at its core. And that's what I'm talking about. This energy that is basically forms the stuff of everything. That is divine. That is God's energy. That's God's love, if you will. Love is a really tough word to use in this realm. And I understand that's why some people prefer to call it the divine matrix, but because we think of love as just an emotion, but it's really an energy is what I'm talking about here. It is the energy of creation. And it's tough to wrap your brain around it. It really is. But just kind of try to think about it as a field, or being in the ocean or something. And that's what it's like. It's all encompassing. It's all pervasive. It's here. We're all a part of it.
I've often heard that analogy talked about that while we might be a drop in the ocean, we are all the ocean.
Yep.
It's not like we're separate from the ocean.
We're not. Yeah. And we're all connected to each other and to God through this energy of love, or if you want to call it the divine matrix, that's fine too. But yeah, we're not separate from each other. And when you start to really work on connecting to that source love, that's when really amazing things can happen. And it isn't just personally transformative. It can really transform the lives of everybody around you too, even if they're not actively trying to do it. So it is super transformative to dive in there and really connect to it and to embrace it and to understand a little bit more about how it works.
Okay, so you have this chapter in your book that's called Choice. What is that all about?
So choice is really our personal power in being able to shape our own reality, and the reality of our lives. And it's, again, it's choosing the energy that you want to bring into a specific situation. We could do like an entire like weekend workshop on choice. So I'm going to try to paraphrase a lot of this kind of into a little thing. Maybe I should do a weekend workshop.
I think you should. I want to sign up for that.
So it's really about learning how to be more conscious in each and every moment, or as much of your day as you can, so that when you have a decision to make, when you have a choice to make, when you speak something, whether it's, internally to yourself or outwardly to someone else, that you have power over how you're showing up in that moment. And that is super cool, because then when you're conscious of what you're saying or doing or thinking, then you can make changes, and you can make changes that bring love into that situation. So that's really ultimately that power that I'm talking about. And it's, in order to have your full power of choice, it really helps to become more and more aware in each and every moment. Now, what I mean by that, most people, if they're not working on it, are making most of their decisions either in a reaction to something, or out of fear, or out of some other negative emotion. It's usually fear. But people tend to make their biggest decisions. They tend to speak from that perspective too. And then the words they use internally are often from that perspective. So when you change the way that you show up in each of those moments, and be very careful about how you speak, what words you say, what actions you take, you really can bring different energy to a situation and really alter your reality to some extent. You have to realize there are other people around you kind of, working on their own choice too. But the more that you can be conscious and aware and focus in on what it is that you're doing, you can really change your life. That's actually where all of the changes in your life come from. When you are focused and aware in the moment and are not emotionally attached, to specific outcomes, it can make a really powerful choice to go forward. Now, those choices, I'm a spiritual person, so I have a little bit different take on this, but there's also an energy, a kind of a spiritual energy. I know a lot of people are probably rolling their eyes right now, but it really is. I used to think I used to be rolling my eyes too, by the way, although you out there who are rolling your eyes, I would have been rolling my eyes too. But I see these energies now. I can feel them. And so when people make those choices based on something positive rather than something negative, I can feel the shift. And I can feel that shift for myself. It's really an energetic thing. And when you change the energy around a situation, you change the situation. It can be really incredible.
That's just like, spirituality 101 for many people is understanding how to change their energy. Is it about shifting perspectives?
It's about, initially it's about just becoming aware of what you're doing. And I know a lot of people are like, well, what are you talking about? I'm aware all the time. Well, probably not. Most people, like I said, are reacting. And so what I mean by that is being aware in the moment from a non-emotional state of being. And then it is really it's just bringing a different, kind of like a different energy field. It's changing how you're interacting. A lot of times in situations like with individual people, one-on-one, I've used this in workplaces, by the way, in my consulting job. So if there's like an example is if you're in let's say a confrontation with a coworker or something, and that coworker is just totally irrational. I've unfortunately been in these situations where, maybe someone has had a really bad day, or, they're maybe working on something really big in their lives and they just lose it. If you are not pulled into that drama and that emotion and can make a rational decision about what to say, then you can bring a completely different energy to the situation and defuse it. So that's a very practical example. Kind of on the more esoteric side of the house, it somehow seems to be changing literally the energy waves that are kind of permeating the room, if you will. And you can change the way that when you change the way that you show up, it does bring almost a different frequency, and it can almost cancel, or it can oftentimes cancel out other stuff happening in the room and shift it. So some people call this shifting your reality. But it really is shifting the reality of the situation. Now we could get into another complete discussion, which may be another book for me, about, the multiverse and multiple universes and multiple realities. It could actually be pulling in other realities too, but let's not go there because I'm not brushed up on my physics yet, enough to be able to have that discussion. But it could actually be pulling in a completely different reality from that perspective as well. But at the very least, it is changing the energy dynamic of a room or a situation.
I think that's so just impactful, because how often are we in situations where maybe somebody's doing something we find offensive, or they're acting in a way that we don't care about, or they're just reacting, just throwing things out there. And what a powerful place to come from when we are standing back going, okay, and just allowing us to come from a new place.
Yeah, a loving place. And it really, it's disarming for the person who is in this very dramatic, maybe angry state of mind. They're all about the emotion. And when I come into that situation, I just observe and I let them do what they're going to do without it really affecting me. Like I don't get sucked into it because I know it's not about me. It's about them. And if I've done something to trigger it, then, I'll take steps to apologize or whatever, or make amends. But most of the time it's because that person is in just a really bad state and they don't have the tools to be able to work through that in a healthy way. So it just comes out. So I've seen people just, they're in that state where they're really angry and they're just lashing out at whoever happens to be near them. And if you come in with a loving energy and you're just standing there letting them do it, it's kind of disarming for them. And they stop like, wait a minute, how come I'm not pulling you into this? And that's when they stop, that's when you can intervene and bring a different thought process to the situation. And I've seen it really make a huge difference. I don't recommend people doing it like in a physical confrontation. If you've got someone who's violent, that's not where I'm talking about doing this, especially if you're not trained as like an interventionist or anything. But just a typical, angry outburst, this can really change the way that both people show up in the situation.
I know in your book you share about connection and how important that is. Does it seem that we are getting more and more disconnected from one another?
I think we are. I think we're getting, it's like we're being pulled into specific camps, and there's big walls going up, between all or amongst all these different camps. And so there's this little camp called this religion A and religion B and religion C, or, you know, political party A or political party B. And so people within those communities are probably connecting a little bit. But overall, there is this state of disconnection. Unfortunately, the pandemic did not help, but it was already starting before that. So I think it just kind of exacerbated things. But the walls are really strong right now. And that's one of the things that I would love to do, is build bridges across those walls and help people see that we are more alike than we are different. And we need to really get into that zone and kind of make that awareness, make that understanding, and brought kind of build those bridges. And some of us are bridge builders and some are the people that come afterward, and that's fine. But really in each person's life, we're really built as a human species to be strongly connected to a small group of people. So what I encourage people to do is to join those small groups. It could be a family group or whatever. It could be some meetup group that you find in your community too, whatever it happens to be. It could be a photography or bicycling or whatever, but get out and join those groups in person if you can. It is so helpful. I have heard of so many people that have gotten, especially through this pandemic, so disconnected from folks because they feel like they can't leave their homes. And some people still can't. I get that. In those cases, there are online meetup groups. There are online groups that you can join. But connecting with other people really helps us feel like we're human, like we're part of something bigger than just ourselves. If you have time, get out and volunteer for people who need it. It could be delivering Meals on Wheels or something like that. Whatever tugs at your heart, get out of your own house and out of your own head and connect with other people and start to see people for who they are again. Everybody's really just trying to get through this life in as good a way as they can and raise their kids and have a good life and, maybe fall in love and enjoy what this planet has to offer. So get out there as much as you can and make those connections with other people. I think it'll really help kind of bring us out of our little shells that we've gotten into over the last couple of years and help us see that people are really so strongly they're so strongly alike. What I love about having written Awakenings from the Light and now this book, I get emails and from people all over the world, literally all over the world, from basically every faith that you can imagine. And I love it. And they all say, wow, this is exactly like I was taught in our faith, to be loving and kind. So when I see, just from having written these books, that we are so much more alike than we are different. And that's what I want people to celebrate, is the things that we have in common, and get out there and experience those if you can.
Well, I'm not surprised people are reaching out to you. I mean, you were featured on the Today's Show, Netflix, PBS. I mean, your story has been featured just about everywhere. And I feel that people really are very interested in what you have to share because of your experience.
Yeah, and I think they are, for different reasons, but a lot of people are interested in it because I came from a place of a non-believer. I poo-pooed all of this stuff. I didn't really ascribe to any particular belief system beforehand. In fact, I thought spirituality was a little bit of a kind of a distraction before that, and didn't really buy into any of it. At best, I was an agnostic. At most times, I would consider myself back then an atheist. And so that really fascinates a lot of people. And the fact that I was, for so long in the sciences and in geology, you can't get more physical than that, looking at rocks and dirt. And so they were really fascinated. They've been really fascinated by that and how I made, this shift, and that somebody who really didn't have a belief system going into this could come out of it completely changed. It was like a night and day. You were there pretty early on in my coming back, but you weren't there right away. And even my friends were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe how different you are. You're still the same Nancy, but you're so different." So that attracts a lot of people too, about how huge of a change that was for me. And then I just rolled with it. I didn't deny it. I just kind of rolled with it and learned from it as best I could.
Well, Nancy, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your books and be part of your community?
So they can go to my website, nancyrynes.com. That's NancyRynes.com. And then I've also got a Facebook account. You just go ahead and search for me on Facebook. And I also do some stuff on Instagram too. I've got most of my art business on Instagram. So if you're looking to see what, I do paintings as well. So that's where I post most of my new paintings, is on my Instagram account. So just go ahead, and I think that one is just Nancy Rynes. It's pretty easy to find me.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe the time went by so quickly.
I know that time goes by so fast, but we're going to do this again. Make sure to check out Nancy's website at nancyrynes.com for more information on her work, her books, and her upcoming events. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.